For this last part of chapter 3, we're going to focus on what it is to be an acid and a base and the pH scale. So, acidic and basic conditions affect living organisms. When most of life is water-based, uh, of course, changes in um, the environment, if it's acidic or basic, does affect the organism. So let's talk about the water molecule and how uh, it is used to define if something is acidic or basic. So a hydrogen atom and a hydrogen bond between two water molecules can shift from one to the other. So the hydrogen atom will leave its electron behind and it's transferred as a proton or what we call a hydrogen ion from one water molecule to the next. And so the water molecule that lost the proton is now called a hydroxide ion, which is OH negative. And then the water molecule that has gained the hydrogen ion is now called a hydronium ion, H3O positive. So what you need to know about all this are like, okay, Mr. Locklear, why are we going over this? Because water molecules are polar molecules and they form hydrogen bonds. There's an attraction, and these water molecules are in a constant state of chemical reacting. They are constantly reacting with each other. They're not just sitting there, they're constantly moving, interacting with one another. So, this constant formation of hydronium to water molecules to hydroxide ions and hydrogen ions is constant. It's a state of dynamic, what we call dynamic equilibrium, in which water molecules would dissociate at the same rate that they're being formed. Um, and that's fine. That's how most liquid solutions are on the planet. If we was to take a glass of water, right? If you was to sit a glass of water in front of you, you wouldn't notice this constant reacting of the water molecules. They're constantly reacting. Trillions upon trillions of chemical reactions is happening in that glass of water. But it's equal. It's at an equal rate. It's a dynamic equilibrium. However, um, while rare, the dissociation of water molecules has a great effect on organisms. Hydrogen ion and hydroxide are very reactive. And so any changes to the concentrations or the amounts of hydrogen ion or hydroxide ion that exist could create an actual noticeable chemical reaction. So if we was to take a glass of water and I was to add a bunch of hydrogen ions or a bunch of hydroxide ions to that glass of water, it would create a actually a violent chemical reaction. Uh, and if and that's what we call acids and bases. Anything that has a lot of hydrogen ions or creates a lot of hydrogen ions um, increases the concentration of hydrogen ion. It's called an acid. Anything that reduces hydrogen ion, meaning that they have a lot of hydroxide ions, is considered a base. And so if we were to add an acid or base to water, um, the stronger the acid or base, the more violent the reaction would be. with the water molecules. So strong acids and bases dissociate completely in water, meaning that they will completely react and it will be a very strong reaction. Weak acids and bases will have a reaction, but it's not as violent, and they will actually start to swish backwards and forwards until they form some sort of neutrality. Um, Different substances have different amounts of hydrogen ion or hydroxide ions. It is this differences in the amount of ions that we will label a substance based on its concentration of hydrogen ions, and we call that the pH scale. Acidic solutions have a pH value that's less than 7. Basic solutions have a pH value greater than 7, where most biological organisms and fluids have a pH between 6 and 8. Now, there are some fluids, biological fluids, that are beyond those scales of 6 and 8. For example, your stomach acid, gastric juice, has a pH of around 2. So if you look on this scale here, the gastric juice found in your stomach, which is more similar to hydrochloric acid, um, is at a 2, which is very acidic. Which your stomach needs to be very acidic. It needs to be acidic to break down and dissolve the particles that we eat. So here is a pH scale showing things from 0 all the way to 14. And what I want to mention about this scale and the examples that are listed here, these are things that we actually come into contact with in our day-to-day lives. So for example, battery acid, we all drive a car that has a battery and it has battery acid. And that battery acid is one of the strongest acidic things that we actually can come into contact with. That's not a chemical solution that has been created in the lab. And then on the opposite end of the scale, for example, we have oven cleaner or bleach, and we use these strong basic solutions as corrosives or cleaners in our households. One of the things I wanted to talk about is that even though something is called an acid and some things are called bases, a lot of people's minds will instinctually go to the idea that an acid is more deadly than something that is a base. Because when I think of an acid, I think of, like maybe like the acids that are displayed in movies. But in real life, something on a very strong acid and a very strong base are both equally deadly to organic life, organic organisms. So just keep that in mind. If you'll notice here on the pH scale, pure substances like water has a neutral pH. So acidic um, things that are acidic have a lot more hydrogen ions than hydroxide, and things that are basic have a lot more hydroxide than they do hydrogen, which is also displayed here in the solutions in these beakers. Now, most organic life uh, does come into contact with either different solutions that have different pHs, or if you're even talking about, for example, the human body, there are different parts of our body that have more extreme pH levels than other parts. Your stomach is around a 2, your intestines are generally around like 6 or 5. Like, so your blood is a little bit more than 7. So different parts of your body have different pH levels. And a lot of organic life will use buffers to prevent drastic changes in the pH from one area to the next. So buffers are substances that minimize changes in the concentrations of hydrogen ion or hydroxide ion. Now, your book will go over a lot more information about buffers, but that's not required. I'm not requiring that. Um, what I want you guys to know is that buffers exist. The last thing we're going to be talking about is that acidification. So we're talking about how changes in pH can have drastic effects on the organic life uh, in different areas. Well, if we're talking about the ocean, we're now talking about large bodies, large habitats that could be affected by changes in pH. So human activities such as burning fossil fuels can threaten the water quality and threaten the pH levels of the ocean. So CO2 is the main product of fossil fuel combustion, and about 25% of all human generated CO2 is then absorbed by the ocean. That CO2 that is dissolved into the water will form carbonic acid, and this is called ocean acidification. Ocean acidification is one of the leading causes for um, coral bleaching and death of large coral systems uh, in habitats around the world. So this here is showing you how carbon dioxide will get dissolved into the ocean and it will bond with the water molecule here and form carbonic acid. Carbonic acid can be either disassociated or it can be reformed. And so it will be used in the and increasing the acidity of the ocean. So when it enters the water system, it's kind of stuck there for a while. CO3 carbonate is used, well, was used, or well, it's still used, but it was one of the main ingredients for calcium carbonate. And calcium carbonate is what is used to build um, uh, shells and the corals that exist in the ocean. So any shelled organism like clams, um, all the seashells that exist, the corals, they use calcium carbonate to build their bodies out of. If there are large amounts of carbonic acid in the ocean, uh, there's less calcium carbonate for organisms to use. And so a lot of the sea life is dying. And so unfortunately, I have to end the video on, this, it's sad, but it's true in that, ocean acidification, changes in the pH of the ocean, increasing the temperatures of the ocean are leading to a lot of sea death. And so this coral reef on the left, once fiber has been bleached, what they call bleaching, and that it's dyed and turned white. Unfortunately, hopefully we as a human species is able to, we may not stop this process in the near future, but maybe, we can in the future come up and find a solution to help clean up our mess that we've created. And that concludes chapter 3, everyone.